give Tunde Onakoya a round of applause as he makes his way into the room. Hi, Tunde.
Hey.
How are you feeling?
Feeling like I'm about to lose virtue. Virtue is about to come out of me. It's good to be here. Hello, everyone. Good to see you guys. Thank you so much for showing up.
Okay, so when we do these interviews, if you've watched the show, you know I usually start by giving my guests a dilemma. And that dilemma is kind of like a window into their personality. If I ask you to pick one, fame or money, which are you picking and why?
It's interesting that you asked this question because we're literally just talking about it backstage. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I'd have jumped at fame with two hands. But now I'll just choose money and just and be anonymous.
Economies are powered by commerce, and commerce is powered by businesses. But who powers these businesses? Who journeys with them until their vision becomes success? At FSDH Merchant Bank, we are driven by the desire to empower businesses, equip individuals, and ultimately drive economic growth. From massive corporates looking to expand to MSMEs reaching for growth, we have been the link between vision and success for 10 years and counting. Because whatever success means to you, it's all within reach when you journey with the right partner. And if you let us, we can be that partner. Our innovative banking solutions are tailored to businesses and individuals across multiple sectors. We are a subsidiary of FSDH Holding Company, a foremost financial services group with over 3 decades of excellence. Through our innovative financial solutions, we are not just transforming people, we are transforming businesses, powering economies, and shaping financial futures. We are FSDH Merchant Bank, and we deliver simple, seamless, secure banking for you.
Okay, so let's kind of take it back to where it started. So you were born in K2. Your dad was a spare parts dealer, and your mom was a petty trader. And so, with those humble beginnings, what I want to know is how do you, obviously from your POV, how do you think that laid the foundation for you, who you are today?
I think it's important because I think this very early context of my life is very deeply connected to who I have become today. And I mean, of course, when you're in the thick of it, it's so hard to make sense of it, right? But the beauty of any journey is that you only actually get to connect the dots in hindsight, right? And me being born to my parents and in that environment used to be the one thing I hated so much about myself and my background. And I blamed it for the longest time. I blamed the fact that, especially at some point when I missed out on admission, to LASU to study medicine because we couldn't pay tuition, I had deep hatred for my beginning, for everything, because I saw other people, that had privilege. And because we had that very humble background, I thought something had been taken away from me, but it was the most important gift that has defined the very essence of who I am, and also has deeply rooted my empathy, not just from a distance, but for someone that carries the weight of of knowing what extreme poverty is and knowing what hunger is, and also now having great privilege and being able to just stand finally in that gap is the beauty of my life right now. So that context, my mom, my parents, where we grew up, is the reason why I have become.
Okay. You're talking about, navigating that period of strife. So I think in your journey, there's a point where you moved to Odo in Ikorodu, and you've spoken about, that being a period where you saw your dad's was a boss, right? So I guess the boss obviously started developing issues, and what's I picture? So I don't remember which Will Smith movie it is, but the one where like he's trying really hard. I think it's Pursuit of Happiness, where like he's trying really hard and his son is just watching him just go. And so I think what I want to know and understand is, so for young you, watching your dad go through, he's trying his best, but things aren't aligning the way you want it, the way he wanted it to. What lessons did you take from that season in life?
My dad is a good man, and he never had the opportunity to get an education. But my parents, my mom was brought from the village to Lagos into servitude, so she worked as a house girl. She did everything. My mom was a proper hustler, right? So just before I was born, she used to like sweep like major roads, I think with Loma. I think the only reason she stopped was because I think there was an accident where one of our colleagues, while they were sweeping together, a reckless driver just cleared her and she died. And my mom did everything. She sold pure water under the bridge. And my dad, he had his business, the spare parts business. Then I think the government wanted to expand the road at the coal market then, and that just ended. Then through here and there, he first started working as a bus conductor, then a bus driver. Eventually was able to save up to get his own danfo, and things had steadied a bit. Then all of a sudden, there was an accident with a bus, and that was just it. And I remember my dad just went into this spiral where he stopped trying completely. He had done everything, and it felt like at that point there was just nothing more he could do. The one thing he had relied on, that was at least putting food on the table, was completely gone. And how do you just build from those ashes? But my dad is a good man, and in all that time, despite the fact that I had to like drop out of school, he really helped me understand what that sacrifice meant. So I remember I was 10, and he called me and he told me that, you see, this is what has happened. And all of these things helped me learn to almost see life as an adult. I was still really young, so I had to grow up really, really early, right? And he told me this. He said, we don't have money, right? And my mom used to say this. It was something that caused her great pain, because all the times that she would go to other people's houses, help them sweep, wash their clothes, she would see their children, and she would come home and say that in Yoruba, that when you grow, that you're able to speak amongst your peers, because it was one thing that caused her the greatest pain, because she never had the privilege of getting an education. Right, and for that reason, she was serving her own peers, and she never wanted that to happen to us. So you could imagine how painful it was for them to have called me on that day and say, you have to drop out of school. Right, I was the first child. It was just me and my younger brother, and it was a very painful decision for my dad, because he wanted us to be educated. He wanted us to get the education that he didn't have. Right, and he explained to me then that I have to stop, so my brother, that was still, I think, in primary 1, was still learning to read and write, so he could go to school. And he explained why it was important, because I already had the foundational education I needed to at least be able to read and write, basically, right? And I had to now take up more responsibility for the family, which was to assist my mom. At the time, she was selling fruits, go to the markets with her. And it taught me a great deal of like taking responsibility for the family situation. But it also put this burden, this pressure, this first child pressure of having to be the one who will save the family from poverty. And that wasn't always a good thing, you know. But my dad taught me very early to be responsible. And also, despite all of the situation around us, the environment in which we grew up in, he taught us to love, to be excellent, and to also be of service.
Okay, so you're talking about your parents sitting down with you and having that chat. And one thing I think I learned, like going through your journey, was the fact that they could have sent you to a public school, but they did not have faith or trust in that institution for you to turn out the way they wanted you to turn out. So one thing I think I want to understand is, even in the period of downturn, they were still very clear and intentional about the values that they wanted in their children. And so what I want to know is, where did those values come from for them?
To be honest, a lot of it is religion, right? Because my mom, even till now, if I call her, I'm sure she probably just came back from one MFM, power must change hands. Say, mommy, actually, the shing barrow from 10 days. Familiar. So I've tried and I've just given up, because she'll tell you that she be three hours time back on sorry to my non-Yoruba people, but what I'm just trying to say is, my mom, my parents, were very devout Christians, and they very early on showed us like the way, that is right, the path to follow, and in righteousness and in faith. And I think that was really the first reference point, right? And to just to speak to what you said, I remember, like, after dropping out of school, the first year that I was at home, that I wasn't doing anything, my dad wanted to enroll me in a public school. So there was the government school around where we grew up, at the time was Ikorodu Grammar School, right? And this was what now, 2005. So at the time, we had this problem in Ikorodu then, like cultists, right? And there was always one incident on the other in these public schools, or some, senior student hacked a junior student to death. It was always a lot of stories like that. And I'm sure, like, our mommies and daddies can probably remember some of these things. So the government schools were just horrible, right? It was classrooms where no learning was happening, right? But then we're putting all these young teenagers together, and you were just breeding this terrible, terrible culture of violence. And what was also rampant then was internet scam, at the time where we grew up. Yeah, Yahoo, all of that. And it was so bad that some parents were even like getting into debt to buy laptops for their children to indulge. So my parents were very clear that we will never be exposed to things like that. So which was why my dad was very strict, right? You can't go and play ball with other children. Like, he was very strict about those things, right? He didn't give us the liberty to just hang around other kids. And because I was also like pretty recluse, chess was the perfect world for me to escape into, right? Because I couldn't really do all of the other things. Our parents were very careful to shield us, right? But a lot of it was, of course, religion, and also the awareness of the environment which we were living in, right? And they saw that the moral decadence. I can say, I went back to Ikorodu recently, because we are filming this documentary, and I can tell you that 90% of the boys that we grew up together, they're all still there. Most of them are area boys now, street kids. And so I would always be thankful that my parents were overprotective, despite the fact that we didn't have anything. They taught us that this is the way that is right, and if you follow that, right, even without money, right, you will find an outcome that you desire. And my dad would say, not just for him or for them, but for yourself, so you don't regret a future that you like insidiously participated in creating. And everything happens as a teenager, as a young impressionable child. So yeah.
Okay, so now you're talking about the values. So what I want to now get into is the sacrifice. So you've spoken about being at home, it taking a couple of years before you started secondary school. But the how was that your mom went to a private school, which she liked, and offered to work there in exchange for you being able to attend that school. And I think that is the ultimate sacrifice a parent can make. And so what I'm just wondering is just like you watching this happen at the time, like what did that do for you?
So it was, I think, the second year, after I dropped out of school. And because the primary school I attended was this Bako primary school, so I already struggled with my self-esteem, right? Couldn't speak English well, so I was extremely shy, and I was so afraid of like expressing myself. Now, so those 2 years of not even being at home and doing nothing, right? I didn't even remember what a noun was again. And again, there was no money, and anytime my mom came back from the market, she felt that pain, but they couldn't do anything about it because we barely had enough to survive, to put food on the table. And my mom just woke up one day, and because she wakes up very early, right, to go to the market, buy stuff, and take stuff to the school where she would sell fruits. But on this day, she just woke up and she just left home. And she came back and she was like, that the next day that I would follow her to the school. And I was so excited, right, that I was finally going to start school again. She didn't tell me anything. So I got there. I remember they took me to the principal's office. And the first thing the principal asked me, then Mrs. Esson, like, what is a noun? I didn't know what a noun was anymore. And I remember she just shook her head and she was like, don't just see the child that they want to make this huge sacrifice for, that doesn't even know what a noun is. So I remember she was even trying to advise my mom that, just let him go and learn one, vocational trade or something, maybe as a roadside mechanic. And my mom said no. So that was when it dawned on me that my mom had come there to look for a job, right? So I think she saw the poster they were looking for a cleaner at the school. But then she didn't just stop at that, because the salary for the cleaner job then was 3,000 naira, So she went to the principal and said that she wants to work here, but not because of the money, that she doesn't care about the salary. But then she wants her child to be able to come to school there, right? And the thing about like schools then was, whether you're the child of a teaching staff or a non-teaching staff, you get like a 50% cut. Right? I don't know if schools still do that now, but if your mom is a teacher in your school, there's always that benefit. But my mom was a non-teaching staff, so there was the 50% cut, right? And so that was why the principal was, she was just taken aback by that level of sacrifice. And she wanted to meet me, in some sense, to see if it was justifiable. And there I was, I didn't even know what a noun was. So, but then my mom insisted, because she believed that I deserved the opportunity, right, to get quality education. And she was really willing to lay everything on the line for it. And And I can tell you that in the 6 years that I was in that school, secondary school, my mom never received a salary. Everything went into paying my school fees. And on the day I wrote my senior WAEC, she resigned. And that is the only reason. In fact, because like I said, the primary school was like Bako school. So the secondary school was the first real opportunity for me to be in the classroom with like lower middle class children. Like, for example, maybe a way to even like vividly describe this is, in my classroom, I was the only one that we used to speak Yoruba at home. All the other kids, just English. So you can imagine how that must have rubbed off on me. Because I remember the first time I would say nothing in class because I was afraid that I wouldn't, so I don't tabon and everyone would start laughing. But that rubbed off on me because these were kids that, they were not from rich homes, right? But then they were much better than us, right? And I remember when they asked me in the classroom that, so what does your mom do or your dad do? All the other people would say, my dad is a lawyer, is a doctor. I would just say my mom is Yapupa. Because they call her Yapupa. Because my mom she's a very beautiful woman. Shout out to her. And all the students loved her while she was working as a cleaner in the school. But something interesting happened. As I got a bit older, I think it was when I was in GSS 3, I started to deny the fact that she was my mom. I would tell that, she's just my aunt, because I started to feel the shame of other parents would come and pick up their kids. And because my mom was so young, so I thought I could get away with it. So I would say, she's my aunt, not my mom. What a foolish child. But without that sacrifice, I would have never gotten the education and exposure that I needed to build a foundational basis for my understanding of the world and my place in it.
Okay. Like you said, as soon as you finished WAEC, your mom decided she was done with the job. And you've spoken about the fact that you couldn't go to university immediately. And I think I read in a previous interview where you were talking about that being a period where you were filled with so much bitterness and hate. And I look at your life and the way you've been able to, channel that bitterness and hate into creating actual impact. And so, just out of curiosity, when this was going on, and obviously with the benefit of the hindsight you have now, how were you able to, navigate that period?
Okay, so at start of school, my mom had made this huge sacrifice for me. And the very first term, I came first in my class. It was a miracle. No one could believe it, right?
From the kid who didn't know what a noun was. From the kid who didn't know what a noun was.
Yes, the very first term, I came first position in my class. From a kid that used to be 10th, 12th. But that was the period I found chess anyway. So what chess did for me was it gave me a way to carve my own identity. But we'll probably come to the chess thing later. But, GSS 1 to SS3. I wrote my senior WAEC. I was the head boy, and I aced it. I think JAMB I had maybe 292. So everything was clear. Tunde was going to be a doctor. In our home, it was either doctor or failure. There was no in between. There's no, you want to be a YouTuber. And our our Nigerian moms and dads, it was very clear that it was my destiny to be a doctor. Not because, of even the prestige, right? It was because there was already, a clear perception that specific roles and specific career choices, that will give you a clear path to financial freedom, and that for us was the most important thing. It was Tunde has to be a doctor, has to be the kind of person that can save us from poverty. There was no other way. My parents had bet everything on it. Me being the first child, it was clear. It was chosen for me. I had no say. There was no time it ever occurred to me that I wanted to follow my dreams or anything. It was very clear cut and defined. So I did my WAEC, I did my jam, picked Unilag, picked LASO as second choice. And I wrote my exam. I remember that year, it was 2011. I scored 70, my aggregate score for medicine and surgery, MBBS. And that year, the cutoff mark, the merit cutoff was 71. So I missed it by 1 point. But then, I don't know if they still have catchments now. Like if you're from, like a quota system thing, if you're from Ogun State. Yeah, so my catchment was 69. So the way it works is if a lot of people who don't like hit the merit score, and they can have people from the catchment. But I didn't get in. But there was another girl in my class who scored 57 and got in for medicine and surgery because her parents had money, and they knew people. And I think that was the first real manifestation of my resentment. It was, okay, I had done my part, I had done my best, I had given everything, right? And it was the time when I needed the final leap of, okay, at least my parents should know someone, let us get him in or something, right? So that was the first thing that happened. The second thing was, so I got in for LASU, right? But it was the same year that LASU increased their school fees from 25,000 to 250,000. Oh. And we medical students had to pay another 90K or something. So I remember, went everywhere. We even went to one family member to beg, and we lied that we had an accident just to nobody just. And I kept going back onto the portal for registration closed. I remember I cried on that day because what had happened was every single person that I graduated with, they had options. Some of them left the country, Some of them went to do diploma or pre-degree. Some went to private universities. And that was when it became clear to me that we were actually poor. It never really occurred to me because, all of you are in the classroom. So school sort of like shields you from the real world, right? At least all of you are in the class because the school fees has been paid somehow. And now all of a sudden that bubble had sort of like burst. And it was now clear that, Femi's dad is a professor. So because of that, so he got into Ife. And my parents didn't know anyone to have anything. And I felt like it was such a critical period in my life where I needed extra push from my parents to be able to like go to school like my friends. I couldn't go to private university. Where would the money come from? Couldn't do pre-degree or diploma. It was too expensive. Couldn't travel abroad. I was a pipe dream at the time. So that was when my resentment really started. And not for my parents, but it was for the situation in which I was born into that I had no pattern. And that is the real tragedy of poverty, that a child is born into a situation that fully conditions them before they have their own agency. And that takes so much away from that child, right? For the ones that are very unlucky, that bear the brunt of it, they don't even have the right nutrition. So the first 5 months, you're giving them gari, and that in itself, like, is already like one of the major determinants for like a child's intelligence, right? And there's the exposure, there's the education, there's even like healthcare. So all of these things, we have been deprived of all of these things. But despite all of these things, I tried my best to make it through. Now, when I had gotten to the point where I needed the only push, there was nothing that could be done. And it was a very difficult period for me that I may have even contemplated suicide, because it's the worst thing. My friends would come back from school, they would talk about their stories of university, and I had to take a job, as a teacher in one slum community where I grew up. I had this fat tie and this black trouser that almost turned purple, and they would be gisting about how one lecturer did this, and I was just deeply hurt, and I was there trying to prepare for JAMB again, that maybe I have to try harder this time, and that was it. And I harbored that resentment for a really long time until someone told me something. And maybe, again, I say those things now because I have the privilege of hindsight. At the time, nobody can tell you anything. You won't even listen. Because the suffering, it is the nature of it that it blinds you from seeing what meaning can be birthed from it. But we have to make meaning of our pain, or else it will be lost. And it is those that have found ways to make something meaningful from their pain that have truly, truly created beautiful things in the world. And the deeper that sorrow carves, or that pain carves into your very essence, the more beauty it can birth. And what that person told me that finally helped me forgive myself, forgive my parents, forgive everything, was he said, see, and he used this analogy. He said, life is a race, and all of you, this is the starting line, and that is the destination over there. Now, this race is deeply unfair because some people are already just by the finish line. Some are in the middle, some are here, some are at the starting point like you. There are even some that are behind. That's where you are. But the beauty of it is, and it is unfair, is that you can participate in the race. And guess what? That there's no prize for who gets to the finish line first. The person that gets rewarded is the one who makes it to the finish line. Right? And this was helping me in a very wise way understand that I cannot continue to be the victim of my own story. I cannot continue to play the victim of my story. But I have to learn to shed all of that and participate, right? Despite the understanding that there's no fairness. But I am going to participate. And if it means running and crawling and whatever, I will get there eventually. And that put things into clearer perspective for me, right? And I knew my parents, they did all they could. And it was so foolish, such a foolish and angry thing to do, to even blame them, right? And that helped me. And of course, I wrote JAMB again. This time I scored maybe 66. And I just given up on education. Until, yet again, my mom came home with one form. Said, Mommy Sheriff said you should apply for Yabatech. I was like, me, go to Yabatech, Polytechnic. What do you mean? I'd rather not go to school. No, it wasn't even Yabatech. It was Polytechnic in Ede or Osun State, yeah. I said, no. And my mom that night, she just started crying because I knew how much it meant to her that I get an education. And I promised that I was going to go. In fact, I had packed all my bags, everything. I was preparing to travel to Ede the next day. And it's so funny now because I can't even imagine how different my life would have been if that had even happened. Like it was some village somewhere. But I think it was just in the middle of the night that my mom just woke up and she told me that, is this really what I want for myself? And I said no, that I'm afraid to go, and just be by myself, away from everyone. We didn't know anyone there. And she was like, okay. And the very next day, she now came back with another form, which was the Yabatech one, and that was how I got into Yabatech.
Okay, so on one hand, I want to jump to Yabatech, but I want to focus because I think in the middle of this was when the chess came into the picture. And who was Bros B?
It was the barber that,
okay.
Yeah.
So talk to me about Bros B and what someone like Bros B in that community, what he meant and why that formed such a crucial area in your life.
Bros B was the Egbon and Dugbo that could speak English well. Those Egbons that are just there in the streets, and they're always the ones that if they slap you like this, you know that you can't be disrespectful. But he was also highly educated, right? So he was an intellectual hooligan. So Brosby owned a barber shop, and the barber shop also had a game center. So at the time it was PlayStation 1, and they used to use this PlayStation 1 winning 11 games then to play. They call it Awilo. It's gambling. Like, it's just like you choose random teams, then you place a bet. And so a lot of young people love to play Awilo then. Now, Brosby's barbering salon was like 2 streets away from where we lived. So some of the time, when I would follow my mom to market, when she was selling fruits, I would always pass by and see like a lot of children there watching video games, instead of them being in school. So one day, out of curiosity, I was like, I want to go and see, the games that they're playing here. So that day we woke up, my mom woke me up early. Oh yeah, Jamalo. And I don't lie that I wasn't feeling fine, so that I wouldn't go with her, so I could go to Brosby's shop, And this was when I was at home, not going to school. I think I was 10 years old at the time, 9 years old actually. So I went to Brosby's shop, and there were other kids there, they had left home in the morning pretending that they were going to school. But they would go there, remove their uniforms, and be gambling. And I would just watch them and be like, I truly, truly wish that I had the opportunity to go to school, because I was a very curious child. I would have stayed in school because I had this yearning to know, to learn, to understand. So I asked a lot of stupid questions. And it was that curiosity that led me to discovering chess. Because while the noise and everything was happening in one corner, Brosby was in another corner, and he was playing chess. And that was the first time I ever saw a chessboard, right? And I was immediately taken to the beautiful way the pieces were carved. Romantic people will call it love at first sight. But it was love at first sight for me. And I remember I walked up to him, and all the children were not bothered about chess because they were playing, the game. I was the first person to walk up to him and say, Brosby, what is this? And he said, oh, this is chess. It's a game that makes people smart. I was like, So I now held up the knight piece. I said, this is, he said, what is this? I said, it's a donkey. So he now said, no, it's not a donkey, it's a knight. And so I asked him that, okay, so will he teach me how to play the game? And he said, no, just watch. That God has given you, how did he even say this? He has given you 2 years so you can listen more, and 1 mouth so you can listen more than you talk.
Talk less.
And because I just kept pestering him. And it was like, just shut up and watch. So he was playing, and he was reading a book while playing to himself. And I was watching, So the next day, I lied again. I wasn't feeling fine. So I came. So this time, he was playing with his friend. And I would watch them and watch them. And that was how I just kept going back there. And by just watching them, I was able to understand the rules of the game and the pieces. Because they were always playing. Sometimes they were always bantering. So I went back home, and I got a cardboard. So I drew out all the checkered squares. And because I was also a very creative child, I got clay and I molded the chess pieces myself. And I taught my younger brother how to play. So whenever I saw them do, I'll come and use it to beat my brother. So I beat him like 1 million times. So one day, Brosby told me to come and play. And I was so giddy because, wow, I get to play at that table of masters. And I was confident because I felt like, after trashing my brother for so long, I had some secret moves that I could use. And he just checkmated me in 2 moves. And it became my life's mission then to figure out how to defend that move. And, 2 moves became 5 moves. It became 10, became 20. And one day I got a draw against him, and the day I got a draw against me, he gave me a book. It's called Step by Step Chess by Ivan Chenev. It was the first book I ever read that was not like school book.
Yeah.
Then he gave me 2 other books, Gulliver's Travels and Animal Farm. You know, and you can imagine what that would do to a mind of a 10-year-old kid in Ikorodu who knew very little of the world. It was my first introduction to travel the world, you know, through the knowledge in these books. And those 3 books changed my life because it helped me understand the theory of chess, and also helped me understand that there was a world where I could live and explore my imagination through the pages of those books. Of course, I didn't understand Animal Farm then. Had to read it again, you know. But Brosby played a very important role in my life. Maybe not for the obvious reasons of, like, you know, him teaching me chess and all of that, but he helped me believe that that I could control something. Now, there were a lot of things that I couldn't control. Sometimes we'll go to bed without food, you know, all of that. I couldn't go to school. But chess gave me a world to escape to where I could control the immediate outcome of the game. And the thing about chess is, it is a very complex game, but it is also a game of complete information. What that means is, a beginner cannot beat a master. It's not possible. Because you need to have, like, complete information before you can actually succeed at chess. Now, it means there's no element of luck, right? It would always be a game of pure skill. So it means if you play badly, right, you will lose. If you play good moves, you would win. It was a very clear, like, logical line of effort and reward. So for me, as a child, it helped me understand consequences a bit better. It also helped me understand that there were a lot of things I couldn't control, but I could control this, that if I play well, I would win. If I play badly, I would lose. And the choice was mine to make and to forge. And the final thing it gave me a deep sense of identity, having an intellectual identity that I could also apply my mind, right? A lot of the other kids are like, oh, we're going to go. They liked the cultists that could fight, that could do all of that. But they helped me understand that the mind was the greatest weapon. And chess was a way for me to explore that and apply it. So those 3 things helped me begin to build my confidence, which was what I needed. It was a primary thing I needed to go from the Ikorodu kid from the slums to being someone that had self-worth.
Where's Brosby now?
I don't know.
Okay.
Haven't seen him in years.
Okay. So now we come to the future, which is when you go to Yabatech. And you went to Yabatech to study computer science, but that was also like a period where the love for chess really actualized itself. And I think it's funny because you didn't want to go to Yabatech initially, but it ended up being something that proved like a really pivotal moment. So talk about that.
You know, the only reason why I became a good chess player was because of Yab. If I had gone to any other university in the world, I would have never pursued chess. Now, and that's the thing about, like, the convergence of time and an idea. So it's like the season in which I got into Yabatech was the specific time that I needed to. Because Yabatech at the time was the #1 chess playing community in the country, right? And for those that probably are familiar with it, that sports complex, you'd always see some people playing chess in front of it. And it had the strongest chess team in the country. And in fact, Yabatech represented 2 things, both for Scrabble and chess. The best Scrabble players in the world used to train at Yabatech because Nigeria is the #1 Scrabble country in the world. Them Oloro, these guys. So it was that convergence point for a lot of, like, very concentrated talent, right? Both for Scrabble and for chess. So it was the only place in the world that I needed to be at the time. You know, and even at the time, I had given up on chess. I was just walking. When I just saw people playing chess, I was like, oh, I played this chess when I was younger. And so I just stumbled into it. And the coach called me and he was like, "Oh, you play chess? So yeah, play this girl." And the girl just beats me in like 10 moves, you know. So, so what Yabatech did for me was, it gave me friends that were like me, that were nerds, very passionate about chess, and were maybe even autistic in some sense. All my friends had some very weird stuff. So we didn't pursue vices, like all the vices of being in college, maybe women, drinking. The first time I ever entered a club or anything was like maybe just 3 years ago. So all my time in like school, I didn't even know there was another like life like that existed. And because these guys they were just nerds, you know, books, chess, library, and that was it, right? So it helped me find the right community, right, to be completely obsessed, right, with the desire for knowledge, both for chess and for everything else, right? And these were like Julius, Daniel, Jimmy, you know, Biola. So we're like that crew. So all of us, we became the strongest chess team, university chess team in the country. Like we represented the school at Wapoga games. We won gold medals all through. And that was when I became like a true professional. Would walk from Yabatech to stadium to compete. So Yabatech gave me the freedom to not just learn from some of the best players in the country, but to also play actual rated competition, right? Because the competitions only happened at stadium in Surulere, right? I never went home during the holidays because there was no home to go back to at that point. You know, my dad had gone back to the village, was working in a bakery with a sister. My mom had gone to somewhere around Festac, you know, to live with her twin sister. You know, they would always sweep other people's houses. You know, my brother had gone off with some friends to Ijebu, and so I was just alone in the world. So that community of friends was my anchor at the time. And also, it gave me all the time that I needed to be completely obsessed about chess. So if I had gone to Unilag and maybe become a doctor or something, if I had gone to Unilag, I would have never discovered that. I'd have never pursued it. So everything happened in the right crucible, from the school to the friends that I had to the time that I was in it. So it was that convergence of those things that helped me become a master.
Okay, so after Yabatech, you become a teacher. And I'm curious, why teach?
Now, after Yabatech, finished in 2015, I was pretty confused about what to do. There were two options I was considering. The first one was I wanted to be a grandmaster. So I wanted to travel, right? Because you can't be a grandmaster in Nigeria. You have to travel to Europe and compete. And traveling was just something that was so far remote from my reality because I was still owing the woman on my street 200 naira. So I have to go and pass another place so she won't see me. So travel was just, you know, but then a lot of people were jackpotting in that period too. And so my plan was to jackpot through a chess tournament, then seek asylum. You know, me and my friend, we had this plan, you know, showing what they say. And so we were trying to like save up money. And so now, when school ended, I couldn't go back home. There was no home to go back to. So I was always just hanging around in school. Then one day I just carried my bags and I went to my dad's sister's place. And when I got there, I told them that, oh, I don't have a place to stay. And she was like, they have a rule that they don't host like family, extended outside family. And I was like, okay. So she went inside. I just put my bag at the door and I slept there. She woke up. She saw me there. She was like, oh yeah, come. So that was how I started living with my dad's elder sister. And so I had a place to stay, but I didn't have a job. Right. So I was trying to look for a job. I studied computer science. So I was doing like a bit of design at the time. I tried and tried and tried. So a few places here and there, but then nothing. So I now decided that, okay, in that time that I was at home, like after my secondary school, I did some teaching, right, to raise money to buy my jam form. And that was when I fell in love with teaching children. I used to teach them, I think, computer and music at the time. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll start teaching again. So I applied to one school in Songwater, and I was living in Ikorodu. My salary was like, what, maybe 10,000 naira or something. So I would go from Ikorodu very early in the morning on Monday to Songo. The school was just right before Redeem Camp. Lotto, not Songo, Lotto. Right. So, and it was a very dusty road that time. Like, it was brown dusty. They were building the camp, the new camp then. So I would sleep there in the classroom till Friday, then I would come home on weekends. So, and I was teaching computer then to the kids. So that was when I really fell in love with teaching, because it helped me really understand like the pedagogy of like teaching, and knowing that if a child is not learning in the way that you're teaching them, then you must only teach them in the way that they can learn. And because I was always very curious about these things, it helped me really feel like I was contributing something meaningful to the child's life, right? Then something happened. One day, I think the school bought a chessboard and a Scrabble board, and they were like, "Oh, is there anyone here that can play chess, that wants to start doing games for the children?" They didn't know I was a master at the time. So I was like, "Oh, I'll volunteer to do it." So I started teaching the kids chess and Scrabble, right? And what I learned was, especially for a lot of the kids that struggled so much academically, when I started teaching them chess, it helped build their confidence, right? And it was such a non-conventional way to get them to listen and to also apply themselves. And it began to show even in their results. So parents would come and give me gifts that, oh, their child always talks about you, and his grades have improved. There was even this child that had Down syndrome, but he was the best chess player. And that really helped him, you know. And so all of these things helped me fall in love with teaching. Then at some point I just thought, because the school that I was going to in Lotto was so far and they were paying me just small money, I said, let me just start doing this chess in schools. So I started to research. This was between 2016 and maybe early 2016 and maybe early 2017. So I did a lot of extensive research on like chess and math. So I developed a chess and math curriculum, and I started taking it to schools, you know, that CEO, add chess to your curriculum. We can use this to like improve like academic outcomes for your student. So most schools are like, this chess, what's the difference between chess and Ludo? Like, so they didn't understand it, because some of them had it as an elective, like after school thing. But I wanted it to be like a curriculum program. And the math was very simple in my head. Like, yes, this is a way for me to become successful, because if there are 200 children in a school and each of them pays 5,000 naira per term, you know, as for chess, for a whole term, then I'm a millionaire. You know, and I wasn't going to really, it was not like big capital expense. So it was just simple maths for me, until I got to the school and they're like, 5,000 naira per child. Come on. Let's give you 10K salary. Then, so what they would do, they would go and charge the parents that amount, but now give me 10K salary instead of giving me what they charge the kids per head. But I did it anyway because I actually loved to teach, and all I wanted was a chance to prove that. And I know between 2016 and 2018, I taught more than 2,000 children chess, and a lot of them now, they are like finished from university. They always message me, Uncle Tunde, we're proud of you. So I spent that time really nurturing my my heart, the heart of a teacher, before Chess and Slums even happened.
Now let's get to Chess and Slums. So I think you went to a place called Majidun, and that would eventually inspire Chess and Slums. So tell me the story of how.
So I grew up in Ikorodu, in Owutu, in a place called Ikorodu. So it's a slum community. So on the other side of that slum is another slum called Majidun. So so at the time, I was teaching. I wasn't living in Ikorodu anymore. I was living with my aunt, But then I used to play piano in a jazz band. I used to play in church as well. So, and that was like being always in church all the time growing up. So that helped me learn how to play most musical instruments, the drums, the guitar, the piano. So that was what I was using to just survive. So after church, I would see that my friends, the guys in the band, they won't go home straight. They will just drop at this Majidun bus stop. And I was like, what are you guys going to do there? They didn't tell me. So apparently they were going there to smoke weed. But I don't smoke. So they thought maybe I would tell the pastor. So that day I insisted on going with them. And they were like, okay, come. So it's a place called Lungu in Majidun. And we all sat down. And you see those guys, like you see machetes, scars on their face like this. These guys have like hard stories. And all of us, they will sit together smoking and talking. You see children running around, smoking too, doing hard drugs. It was a very terrible ghetto. And I love to be in that gathering, right? Because I love to listen to the stories. But one day, like after service, we were just there. I had an epiphany. And this was in, I think, late 2017 when this happened. And I saw some of the children there. They were doing hard drugs. They were doing crack. They were smoking. And it just dawned on me that I also grew up like this. The only thing that shielded me was chess. Right. And what I said earlier about the real tragedy of poverty is that a child is born into this environment that fully conditions them. And one way to even explain it is, if you ask that child, like, who they want to be like, do you know what is like a tenable example of success in that community? Is one Egbon Adugbo that did Yahoo and uses an iPhone. That for them is the epitome of success. Or maybe he drives a Benz. So that begins to tell you something about how we live in our bubbles here, but we completely forget that there are people that are still in these confines, right? And so how can you even tell them to dream when there's already like a ceiling for that? And that ceiling was imposed on them. They did not choose it. And that itself is the real tragedy of poverty. It's not living below $2 line or whatever that is. It is that the children are completely removed from systems, right? And that complete removal, right, is what makes this vicious cycle of poverty so effective, right? And that is why we have 100 million people in extreme poverty. It's because that cycle is propagated through birth into an environment. But the environment in itself is what is destiny. And it was a very sad thing. And I don't know why I just had that awareness on that day, And the next Sunday, I decided to bring a couple of chessboards. And at the time, I was already teaching in schools, so I loved working with children, But at the time, I'd resigned from my school job because I was so lean, waking up early, going to Songo, Abule Egba to teach. And at the end of the term, I would just get maybe like 25,000 naira after 3 months of working, I decided to quit. And my single mission in that period was to jackpot, to leave this wayward country and go and seek greener pastures, So I got a job in the UK to come and work in a school as a chess teacher. So I was happy, I was preparing everything until I had that epiphany. And it was understanding that maybe the children that really need this chess are not the ones in the classroom, are the ones that cannot make it there. Because the ones in the classroom, there was one time I used to be the chess coach of Vivian Fowler. One of the girls asked me that, "Uncle, this chess you are teaching us safe. Is this so we can become a chess teacher like you?" I think that was even the day I resigned. Because I just looked at my torn shoes like this and I said, you know what, she's right. Because how can I tell them that chess will change their life and my shoe is torn? And I felt like I don't want to be in this country. I want to go where my gift is valued. So that was when Jack Ma became my mission until I found purpose. And purpose for me was now understanding that the next Sunday I could come with chessboards and I could leave the best part of myself with the children, which is my talent of chess. And in doing so, I would have created a safe space for them to learn to apply their minds, because somebody gave me that opportunity, and that was what helped me become. And the more I thought about this, the more I was convinced that this is what I needed to do. And I came the next Sunday. So the kids, of course, they had come, they were smoking weed, and I just gathered them together. I was like, you know what, today, let's do something else. And because they're very rebellious teenagers, they're like, oh yeah, don't worry, let's. And I showed them the night's piece for the first time. I said, what is this? And one of them said donkey. But he didn't say donkey, he said kete kete. And I smiled, because that was an exact deja vu moment. And the beauty of what happened in that moment was, these children had been deeply hardened by the environment, but through all of this brick wall, they're still children at heart. And the gift of being a child is the gift of curiosity. It's the gift of still having a wonderful way of seeing the world. And the only reason is because there's still a lot of gap of information. Life has not really shown them a lot of things. So with that gap, you have an opportunity to imprint new information that will stay with them. And I remember showing them the chessboard, and I told them my own story. And I can tell you that day, in just that one class, they were able to learn a lot of things. The names of the pieces, the board coordinates. I mean, they had taught chess for 2 years in private schools, a lot of smart children. Had never seen children learn at that pace before in just one class. And that was when I realized that there was something that we're neglecting here. And that was really how Chess in Slums started.
So one thing I want to talk about is looking at the legacy chapter. So you built this brand of public trust. I was telling Taiwo the other day, I went to an event on Tuesday, and there's a guy who's here. So at the event, I was saying, I'm doing this thing on Saturday. And this guy came to me and he said, Uncle Tunde means so much to me that he has to be at that event. He's here today. I'm not going to, put him on blast. But I think the legacy you built, where there are all these children who look at you and they call you Uncle Tunde. They're the ones who call you Uncle Tunde symbolically. And they're the ones who call you Uncle Tunde because we know that you've adopted 6 of these kids. And, you come on social media, you tell us their stories. And it's just like, how can someone be so selfless? But what I want to know more about is those 6 kids you've adopted. What are their stories? What do they mean to you? And why did you feel it was important for you to take on that role in their lives?
It's funny because I remember going on a date maybe some years ago. And the first thing I told the girl was, I've adopted 6 children. Just so you know, before we start asking, what's your favorite color? and I'm 30, and I remember when I adopted the first 2 kids, I was 25, so it was 5 years ago. And no one does that. It doesn't even make any sense. But I'll tell you why I did it and why it makes sense now, right? So, of course, I had started teaching chess to the children in that Macedon slum. I called my mom and told her that I don't want to travel again, that I had found purpose. And my mom cried because, again, that time, you know how crazy it was that, you're a charity case. You're saying you want to do charity for other people. And with everything we had been through and with all the hope they had, I was going to be a doctor, that was dashed and everything. To now come, after getting a life-changing opportunity to travel to the UK, to say that you're going to neglect that and do chess for children that cannot pay you. It was a lot of fights, But now, thankfully, my dad he would drive his friends to, there's this big billboard in Ibadan with my picture. Say, yeah, that's my son. You know. And I love my parents, and I would always be thankful that I had that beginning. Without that beginning, you know, I would have never been able to do this. Right? And it is God that gives purpose that suits the nature of a man. And there's something that is deeply embedded in our nature by design. Our purpose cannot be far from it. This thing has been designed to contain water. You can use it for other things, but the true nature of it is to be able to hold this liquid. And that will be the best thing it would ever be useful for. So, without my beginning, I would have never had the level of thoughtfulness and empathy, right, to be able to stand in the gap for these children. And that was how I understood my work. It wasn't just, chess is a game that helps them build the cognition, the intellectual benefits, critical thinking. It wasn't that. It was I had found a way to use my talent and give it back to these children as a gift to their own lives. Because that is what brings meaning to whatever privilege that we have. It's the only way we can justify our privilege. Because if you have this talent and use it for yourself, it will bring you personal success. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you know what is so much more powerful than that? That you take that talent, and the moment I decide to share it with Muyiwa, it becomes a gift to them.
Maiwa.
To Maiwa, rather. It becomes a gift to him. And that is how our entire civilization has advanced. That men and women of great talent, of great eloquence, of remarkable ability, they were able to nurture it. And they were able to design it into maybe a product or a service or maybe the airplane or maybe this. And by giving it back to the world, they have advanced our lives and they have improved its quality. Right? And that was how I understood what I needed to do in Ikorodu. And I said no to the opportunity to find my own personal success. Right? And it was a hard thing to do. It is still a hard thing to do that I would never advise anyone to do. Because maybe my story is that of an outlier, you know, and I also recognize that because there were some bits of it that I was lucky, I had luck. There's some bits of it that the timing was perfect. But who becomes the outlier is the man that can stay through all of the seasons. It's the one that emerges and the world says, oh, that is an outlier, you know, and I thought the kids, I was diligent with it. Every Saturday after choir rehearsal, I'll go and teach the kids. Every Sunday after church, I'll go. In fact, at some point, I resigned in church so I could have more time on Saturdays, you know, and I was teaching the kids. Then one day, one of the boys, Ayomide, he came to me and said, oh, uncle, I want you to meet my mom. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, no, let's go. So he took me there. It was this shack, you know, it was in a slum, so a terrible place. She was sitting on the floor. So I was like, mommy. I wanted to like greet her. And she was like, Duruntie. She had always wanted to come to where we used to train the children in the community, you know, but because of her condition, that she couldn't come. And I was like, So that was when I noticed that she had just one leg. The other leg had been amputated, you know, and she was always there, you know, just begging people for money and all of that. And she said that she had seen a lot of like improvement in Ayomide's character because he used to be a very stubborn boy. It was the menace in the community, you know. But since he joined the chess training, you know, he had become a bit more measured. And she just said she wanted to say thank you. So she asked him to bring me, you know, and she's a very jovial, lovely woman. So I just said, he's still a stubborn boy, but Asha Mama, and the boy had dropped out of school, you know. And she said, the boy has a brother, an elder brother, Jami. But the only reason that one can't come is because he goes to the mechanic, all these roadside mechanics. He was learning to be a mechanic. He had also dropped out of school. And she explained her situation. So I asked her what happened. She said, so she used to have like a food business where she used to sell food on the streets. Then, you know, that sort of like ended, and then one day Jamiu became sick. He had this infection from a wound and his legs started to like swell, and all of that happened. And she said she didn't have any money, and they wanted to take him to the hospital, but there was no money to go to the hospital. So that was when she started going to all this bola, this refuse dumping site, to pick plastic, the recyclable plastic. So it was while she was doing that, right, just so she can raise money to treat the boys like that, that accident happened. So one of the trucks that was like coming to dump stuff just lost control and just ran into people. So he caught her leg, and it was really bad. Like, it was so bad that they literally had to cut it out so they could remove her from under the debris. Then, because they were also really poor, they didn't take her to a hospital, right? And so the wound sort of like got infected, so it was just bad. They had to cut the entire thing, and that was it, right? And I was so broken on that day because she had such beautiful children that were just so full of life, and I didn't know this was their background. But it was a similar story for almost all the children that we thought, right? So on that day, I committed that I was going to be a part of their lives, you know. So after training, I'll come and check up on her. I didn't have money then, so sometimes I'll just give her the 100 naira I have, 200 naira, you know. Then this was in 2018, and it was around the time when we just started. Then in 2019, I remember we came for training, and so at the time I told Jamie to join us. So I told him to stop the roadside mechanic thing, that I would get more value, you know, from learning chess on weekends, you know. Then we put both of them in school. It was at the time, so we now saw that, okay, even after teaching the kids chess, a lot of them still can't go to school. So we started reaching out to my friends. They're like, oh, I can support one or two. So we put both of them back in school. Then, so that time, Jamil called me and said, Uncle, my mom is sick. Then I came to see her, and she was this lean, like this lean. I said, what happened? He said, she has malaria. Wait, let me be sure Jamil is not here, first of all. Because I saw them at an event. I said they were going to come. So I remember carrying her in my arms. You know, I got a cab. I put her in a cab, and I took her to the hospital. And when we got to the hospital, so they tested and they found out two things. First one, she had malaria. Second thing was she had HIV/AIDS. Now, the HIV/AIDS had happened because when she lost her leg, she got the wrong blood type. It was just such a mess, you know. And I remember exactly, it was horrible. I just looked up, and the hospital was here, and there was this entrance, the door. The kids were standing by the door barefoot. So I didn't want them to know. I just looked at the kids in that moment, and that was when I started crying, because they were the ones that had been around their mom's blood, or like in the time when she was recovering. And I just wondered that, was it possible that the kids were also infected? So I just had them test the kids without telling them what it was for. Thankfully, it came out negative. You know, then I remember I carried the mom to the heart this thing for the antiretroviral drugs. You know, the doctor started to explain, she would have to take fruits every day of her life. They have to use this drug every single day of her life. And the woman was just, she didn't even say anything. So I explained the situation to her, and she didn't say anything. She kept mute during the entire ordeal. And the first time she spoke, she just said, please just take care of my children. That was just it. And, you know, I just told her, Mommy, worry, you know, we'll try, we'll raise money, we'll make sure that, you know, and we carried her back home. After 1 week, they called me that she was dragging herself across the street, that she wants to go back to her village. So I came, because she wouldn't listen to anyone. So I was the only one that could pacify her. So I talked to her, Mommy. She said, okay. We wrote her one money. The next day again, they said she was doing the same thing. I came again, I begged her. She said she wants to go back to her village. That's the only place they can take care of her. I said, okay. So we got a bus, put her in a bus, told Jamie to go with her, go home. And Jamie came back because of school. So I would call her, how are you? She said, okay. After like 2 weeks, you know, I called her, she stopped picking. Then one day someone called that she was gone. And that was it. Jamie and Ayo never knew their dad. He left them when they were born. So I had to make a decision. Now, they didn't really have any family member. I think it was just one uncle from the village that was like, oh, they should bring the kids to the village. That they will come and work on the farm. And I was like, work on the farm. Children that they've been learning chess, they've been doing so well in school. So this is what you reduce, their lives will become reduced to. And at the time, I didn't even have a place to stay. I was still living with my aunt, right? And so I had to make a decision. Because the uncle was like, okay, you don't want them to go to the village then? Oh yeah, take them in now. But I couldn't do that. So what I did was, one of our volunteers, I called him and said, can they stay with you since you live in Ikorodu? Pending the time, I can maybe get my own place. So they stayed with him. Then I had to get my own place for the first time in my life. I'd never lived alone before. So I had to get a place in that same Ikorodu, so it's close to their school. And as soon as I did that, they moved in with me. And they've lived with me ever since. I mean, now, when Ayo lives with my parents, and Jamie is already in university. And Jamie recently won the gold medal at the United Nations Games in New York. And, a lot of time, I mean, he's been to America now, he's doing Big Boy, he's going back to America in August. And I just think back on the moments when the mom asked me to take care of them. And there was no way in the world that I would have believed that I could carry the weight of such responsibility, right? And I'm just thankful that I got to take a stand in that moment, even when I knew that I didn't have the capacity for it. And I guess the lesson here really is, how do we really define empathy, or how do we really understand what we need to do when we see a situation that we feel so helpless? Like when there's a situation that you feel so completely jaded and helpless, and you just don't have the capacity to influence it or to impact it at the scale, at the complexity which, like, it burdens you. But what that taught me was, as long as you have a heart and you have the will to do something, regardless of the scale, right? As long as you commit your heart to it, in the very simple things that you can control, right? You will never understand how far it can go, or how other people will join you eventually in carrying the weight of that burden. I didn't raise Jamie alone. There was a lot of moving parts, all his teachers, even my parents, everybody. Now, went to America, beating everybody, won the United Nations Games, won the tournament that we did in Athens, Georgia. He won $500, won scholarship. He's almost done with university now. Imagine if he had come back to the village. That maybe just been, So like that. The stories are plenty, so we can't say everything. But you see that I didn't have a choice, yeah? Yeah, so six of them. But thankfully, I'm not the one taking care of them now. But they're in good hands.
Okay, so I think a couple of days ago, Lola Shone announced that she's doing an illustrated book around your life. You spoke earlier on about the documentary that you're working on and off, and then you also recently announced that you're trying to build a free school. And so, and this goes back to the point about the legacy. Like, you've reached that point where you're trying to do all these things. And I think for me, what I want to know is, what's the underlying inspiration? So obviously you've done all these things. You've kind of made the change that you feel like you need to make. But why do you now look at these things as the next step?
So the last 7 years have been very interesting. We've done a lot of really interesting things, right? And again, and I say this because I feel like I always need to remind people that I'm just the the fine boy that gets to tell the stories. You know, there's an entire army of people who have poured their hearts and lives into this journey that the world does not see. Right. So shout out to all of them. You know, Zlata, Bukola, Samuel, Emmanuel. These are people that are the unsung heroes of Chess and Slums. And we've been together for the last 7 years. And I have had the honor of a lifetime to be the one to tell the stories and to be the one that people see. But every time people say, oh, well done today, God bless you, in my head, I'm just like, God bless everyone else too. God bless the team. God bless Bukola. You know, because it has been this very cohesive effort of going against the grain. We've done a lot of things. We've gone to Oshodi on that bridge. We've stayed there for 7 months. We've done a lot of things. We've helped so many children. And we recently built an innovation hub in Yaba with Lufthansa. You know, now the kids from Makoko, they go there after school every day. They're learning, they can even do coding much better than me now. They do design, they do all of these things. So social media is even just a fraction of like, what is it that we've actually done? There's still so many untold stories, right? We've done all these things, and we're thinking of scale and legacy. I don't like to bother myself too much about legacy because when I start to think too much about that, then I start to perform, you know. But I don't ever want to live a life of performance to an audience. I only want to live for the audience of one, which is God, and to be able to use the gift that He has given me, and with this clarity of purpose, to be able to use all my influence, all the fame that I have now, to continue to make room for other people. That is the only thing that I want to do, right? So legacy, if people forget, I honestly do not care, right? But to also be able to institutionalize our ideology of what I believe the future should be for the children that are forgotten. I cannot continue to always be the hero of the story, because I'm just one person with my own flaws and my own inadequacies. So which is why we began to think about the idea of the institution. We have a mini version of it with the hub that we have in Yaba that can take maybe 200 children. But this institution, and my vision for it, is for it to be the biggest chess institute in the world. But it wouldn't just be like any other kind of conventional place to learn. You know, it would really be like educating children in a different way and really meeting them at the point of their need. One of the major challenges we had at Oshodi on that bridge, for example, was we went to Oshodi on that bridge, started teaching chess. Now, there were kids there that were like 15 years old already. They dropped out of school when they were in primary 1. So how do you really define education for a child like that? Like, do you take them back to primary 1? It's not possible. So obviously, a lot of them are falling through the cracks, right? And our easy solution is kolo. Right? But I believe education is the capacity for thought, for independent thoughts, right? For critical thinking, right? And being able to read and write is the very basic foundation that underpins it. But a truly educated mind is a mind that is able to think, which is why chess for us is not the end. It's the means to several ends. It's just the beginning of giving them a basis to be able to think for themselves. And everything else flourishes from that. So we want to institutionalize this thing where we're able to build something that becomes a space for the redefinition of education for the forgotten child, for children in extreme poverty, for the street kids, where they can come into this institution and they can come out of it with a truly, truly educated mind. So we're still trying to put all the bits and pieces of it together. The location is going to be in Lagos, you know, most probably. It is going to be thousands of acres of land. It is going to have, I was in Harvard, you know, and I was invited to the MIT Media Lab. And the MIT Media Lab is one of those places that holds like the highest patent in the world. A lot of the technology that has come from that building has changed the entire world. Just one building. Because it has become like a convergence point for talent. So that is what I really want to do with this Chess Institute, to institutionalize what Tunde considers an ideal world, a world where a child can walk into this place and they can come out of it with the education and the confidence that they need to fight for their place in the world. I'm not going to label it as a school or something, but I don't have all the answers yet, but it is definitely going to be something different. It is going to be the kind of education I want to see in the world for a child, regardless of what their starting point is.
Okay, so recently you did something really amazing. So you got into the Guinness World Record, the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest chess marathon. You did it last year, and you decided to do it again this year. And I know we've seen like a wave of everyone trying their own their own attempt at a world record, but I guess
The Chef Dami version of the.
I want to understand, what inspired it the first time, and what that process was like for you to go from this just being a dream to actually making it happen.
So I've missed a very important story because someone asked me on Twitter 2 days ago that, are you a madman? And I said, I just wanted to block him, but I just said, yes, I'm actually a madman, actually, because, and I'm not saying like mad as an MTN, the MTN advert, like an actual, if you get it, you get it. But like actual madman, because, and this is an important story I have to tell, because again, I don't expect anyone to have the same levels of conviction I had and the same levels of faith I had in an idea 7 years ago. Again, I speak now with so much confidence because I have the benefit of hindsight. But when you're in the thick of it, all these aspire to perspire will never, yeah, when poverty sits you down, to be hard to believe or to have faith. But the thing about faith is, the Bible defines this in a very interesting way. But I think faith is the only map that we have when we don't have complete information, when we have no sense of direction. It's like you just have faith that this will end up in this way. And you have faith in this thing that it seems very impossible or hard to understand in every moment. Right? But that faith is the only thing that can show us what reason cannot. There will always be a reason why this thing wouldn't work. But faith is the only thing that can show us what reason cannot. I will tell you why I started playing chess again. Because a lot of people probably are not aware of this, but I stopped playing chess for 6 years so I could focus on the Chess and Slums project. I only started playing chess again last year. Right? And the reason why that happened was because I had surgery in 2023. I had a hip replacement surgery. So when I was born, I felt ill. I think I was 9 months. My mom doesn't remember all the details. It was probably measles or polio, and so I was already like trying to walk, but when I felt ill, I stopped walking completely. And of course, we didn't have the luxury. Going to the hospital was a luxury. So it was always one mama nurse in the community, and that nurse injected me wrongly. And it triggered what we call a vascular necrosis, which is like the death of like blood supply to bone tissue in the joint. So when necrosis happens, it literally just dries up like the blood supply to your joint. So it's like the fluidity that it should have is just gone. So, of course, my parents didn't understand what had happened. I think it was when I was 10 years old that I started to feel a lot of pain in my right leg. And I noticed that I couldn't walk well. It was just so bad. And I'll be crying every night. My mom would use a boniki. We couldn't go to the hospital because the first time I ever entered the hospital, I was 21. Right? And that is, again, another bubble. To some people, the hospital is still a luxury. That is the truth. which is why Agbo is their only, and so it became a pain I had to learn to live with, right? And maybe this was a lot of the reason for my madness, because I felt like I had nothing to lose anymore. Now that pain lingered, I lived with a very terrible limp. My pain, it was just horrible. But I became numb to it at some point. Then in 2018, when I was planning to check, something happened. I was coming back from church, and I love the thrill of like crossing the express instead of using the bridge. So this night I just went to, and I just felt a sharp pain, the kind of pain I had never felt before, and I fell in the middle of the road. Thankfully, there was another guy too that was crossing the express, so he just pushed me into the cupboard. And I remember I got home that night and I cried because I knew something had happened, and something like this, like if it happened again in the wrong place, then what if I die or something? So I started to Google what it was. I had never really tried to understand it because we didn't know, right? And that was when I found out what exactly it was. And I checked if there was a solution for it. Oh, surgery, like $80,000. Where will I say that one? So I would say this, that it was the first thing that gave me it gave me a reason to stay. And I say this because when I Googled like the symptoms, the consequences, so everything was just saying one thing. You have maybe 10 years to be able to walk before you start having scoliosis or all these other things. So I immediately knew that it's either I live as a victim of this situation, again, that I did not choose. The nurse probably doesn't even know what happened till now, And I'm saying this because we can only connect the dots in hindsight. And to also help us understand how to construct meaning from our experiences. Because one thing will happen to two people, and those two people will leave with a different understanding of it, right? And being able to construct meaning from your experiences really is first learning to not be a victim of it, regardless of how terrible or how negative it was, right? So it was either I started to like self-destruct, like, my leg, this, or I made some sense of it. And that was what I did. Because someone had taught me to not be a victim of my own story. So what I just did was, I sort of like compartmentalized. Okay, so if I have 10 years to be strong, what do I want to do with those 10 years? And that was the first real reason why I decided to stay back, right? And say, I'm not going to use the 10 years of my youth to run away to London. I'm going to use it to do something that is very meaningful to me. Now, fast forward to 2022, I was playing football and I felt that pain again. And that was when I knew that it was time to finally go to a hospital. And for the first time in my life, I had an x-ray. I've taken many children to do x-rays, but I never thought to do one myself. And when the result came out, the necrosis was so bad that my hip joint had completely collapsed into my pelvis. So what that meant was I was going to end up on a wheelchair. Now, a hip replacement surgery is something they recommend when you are like 72 or 80 something. So the reason is because you can only do it once in your lifetime, maybe twice. So it means if you do it while you're young, you'd have to do it like 3 or 4 times, because the implant has a lifespan of like 10 to 20 years if you're lucky, right? And one of the things that they use in making sure like the implant stays is they pour something like cement inside the bone and one iron rod. So it's like they were literally, during the surgery, I was saying, so it's a very complex procedure. And so I had no choice. It was either I do the surgery or I end up on a wheelchair. And I was like, you know what? Even if it means I would have to do it 3-4 times, I know that, again, I will have like 10 to 20 years to use the implant. Oh yeah, let's do it. And I had the hip replacement surgery July 11, 2023. And between July and December, I was in a wheelchair, recovering, using crutches. And that was when, for the first time in my life, I was depressed. You know what it means to have to start learning how to walk again as a child? And for those that probably follow me on social media, you'd have maybe seen some parts of it that I shared just to encourage other people. And I was deeply depressed because at the time, the world was just starting to know me. I was invited to speak at Oxford University. It was the first time I ever traveled, outside Nigeria. So I was happy. Things were happening. Then all of a sudden, if I want to go to toilets, my mom has to come and carry me. And it felt like the world had moved on completely. Right? All the, well done, Tunde, God bless you. I can't even go to the slum again. So it was just me. But you're banning tobacco. We want to look what we got about your man. So it was just me and my mom. And the whole world had gone quiet around me. And what God helped me understand then, which I've said before, is that, and it was a conversation also with someone I said, and I was always very sad that I'll go on Instagram, people are outside, everyone is pursuing their dreams, people on Twitter are fighting, life was just going on. And I was there, I didn't know whether I would ever be able to walk again, And that person told me, he said, see, it's okay for you to just be still in this moment. And it's okay for the world to move on. And because there are seasons in your life when you have to stand still and just let the world move on. Because someday, you will move again and the world will stand still for you. And it was during the world record that those words came back to me. And then I looked up in Times Square and there were thousands of people saying, go Tunde, go Tunde, go. And I was like, wow, the world has really stood still for me in this moment. And the surgery was a very defining time for me because what then it reminded me to do was to live again. I'd neglected all my personal dreams, everything, just to do church in slums. Right? But the thing is that anybody can do charity. Today, there was this Samilari that was sitting in a classroom with children, with school bags, maybe even pay their school fees. Anybody can do that in the actual sense. So what would be the differentiator was to also show your own excellence. So for that reason, I started playing chess again. Started playing piano again. I traveled to Germany. I think that was the video that I played 10 people that went viral. And I went to America for the first time. And I decided that I was going to break the world record. And the story of the world record is even more interesting because I didn't plan it. It was, everything that happened was within 2 weeks. I was invited to speak in America. I went and I said, let me go and see my friend in New York, Ross. We had been working together for 5 years. I'd never seen each other. Then we're just walking in Times Square and I was like, Ross, you know what? Let us do something unforgettable. Yeah. I'm like, what? Let's break the world record. And Ross is like, yes, let's do it. So I was supposed to go back to Lagos the next day. I canceled my flight. So the first hurdle was the world record team. We had to send them an email. It takes 12 weeks to approve it. And we had just a week or two. And guess what? They replied the next day. And they expedited the application for us in 1 day. Now, the next hurdle was Times Square. Now, if you want to do anything in Times Square, first of all, you have to pay like maybe $50,000. Now, I wanted to do Times Square for 3 days. So Ross and I just walked to the Times Square Alliance office. Thankfully, the first person that saw us, this Oyinbo woman, she was like, oh my God, I follow you on LinkedIn. Say, yes. the perks of fame. I was like, yes. He said, oh, I'm a fan too. Help us. So we explained that we wanted to do this world record in Times Square for 3 days, and she was like, Said, okay, she'll get back to us. And the very next day, she emailed that yes, that in the entire year, Times Square is always fully booked. But the dates between 17th and 20th were the only dates in the entire year that were available. And that was the dates that we had applied for the world record. And God just has a way of bringing these things together. Again, you can only connect the dots in hindsight. And So everything was set. The day I just posted it on my social media, everyone was excited. Tunde is doing the world record. So everyone said they would do 60 hours marathon prayer with me. So the day, 2 days before the world record, I felt ill. It was cold. It was a very cold time, in New York. And I was nose bleeding. I had catarrh. So I told Ross that I can't do it in this state, right? Because I don't feel well enough. And that's the beauty of faith. Because now, staying awake for 60 hours is not the hard part. But what makes it hard is that, how do you even know that you can do it? You've never done before, that no one else in the world has ever done before. How do you know that it is you that can now do it? That was the first thing, because there's no way to prepare for it. So the only thing that you must have is faith in your own ability. Because you cannot practice for it. It's as simple as that. Is it that you first do 60 hours, then you now come and do the 60 hours? It's not possible. So you need to have faith in your ability, and that is what they say about the people that change the world must be able to hold the future in their eyes without seeing it. Right. And for me, I wasn't even thinking about the consequence of it or whether I could do it or not. It was so far removed from like my mindset was I could do it, that I will do it. So I had become a man of faith, not because of that moment, but because the many years before then prepared me to do something like that. To have faith in the ability of the children when other people did not see the potential in them. All of these journeys of faith, little seeds of faith, have prepared me to have the ultimate faith. And I was sick. But then again, I said, let me just rest. So the next day, I was feeling a little better. The morning of the attempt, I woke up, I was still feeling a bit. I said, let me just dress up, let me just go to Times Square and maybe we'll postpone this thing. But when I got to Times Square, you know what I saw? Nigerians were already there with flag. The ones that brought flowers, the ones that brought aboniki. There was one woman that said she traveled from London with her son because her son, I'm a hero to her son, and he plays chess. And his dad is late now, but his dad was the one that taught him how to play chess. I was like, you know what? I just went to sit down because canceling or this thing was that one was not even an option again. I sat down and we did it. Of course, it was to raise money for charity as well. But we did it, and we gave the world something new to believe in. And that is the beauty of doing something that no one else has ever done before, right? And those are the kinds of people that we have to celebrate. They're the ones that advance our lives. They're the ones that are responsible for every single thing that we see. Because every single thing you see here is an expression of someone's faith that no one believed in except them. And I remember it was in the 50th hour I looked up. I didn't know what was even happening on social media or back home or all of that. And the entire Times Square was filled with Nigerians. Oh my God. Not even just Nigerians, like people from all over the world. They had come to watch this guy that was doing this crazy thing. And that was when I remembered that the world indeed stands still for the man with the will of fire. That is the truth, that if you have a will that is strong enough, there is nothing in the world, absolutely nothing, that can stand in the face of a man with the will to succeed against all odds. And we did it. And, of course, some Norwegian guys broke it. And, I was like, should we do it again? But the only reason why we did it again this year was because this year we took 5 children from our program to America. And they were like, Uncle T, show us where you did the world record. So we're in New York, and I showed them. And they were like, will you do it again? I said, I've been thinking of it. Like, yes, if you guys would do it with me, I'll do it again. And we did it again. Of course, they couldn't stay awake or anything, but they were playing during the day for a few hours. And I remember it was in the, I think, maybe 53rd hour. That was when I wanted to give up. This is the one we did this year. Because I had started hallucinating. You know how you are looking at the board now, right? You're like, is this a bishop? Or is it a knight? So you first spend some time. When you now know what it is, how does this bishop move? It's already delirious at that point. But then I just looked beside me and I saw the children. Mary from the IDP camp in Yola, Jamiu, Ferdinand, the boy with cerebral palsy from Makoko, Mabel from Ikorodu, Majidun, and Evie. And they were playing chess. So all the chess players in New York were coming to challenge them on the table. And they were playing. And people are surrounded. People were not even watching my game. They were watching their game. And they were winning. The kids were winning. You know, they lost some. And under the lights of New York. And for the first time, it dawned on me that the world actually sees them. If the world had seen them, maybe even Mary like a year ago she was in an IDP camp in Yola. The world, she would have just been, one of those children with kwashiorkor or suffering. She would have just been a number. But now she was adorned in a, cap, a beautiful attire, and she was being seen not because of her poverty or where she's from, but because of her ability. And that is the greatest thing, that we're defined not because of what we look like or where we're from, but by what we have the ability to do. And that is what every human deserves. That we're not deprived of opportunity because of where we're from, but we're given a chance because we have earned our place in the world. And I couldn't give up, because as soon as I saw that, I was just reinvigorated, and we kept going. And we made it to 64 hours. We wanted to go to 70 because the world record was now 61. But my friend just said, that 64 squares on the chessboard. Why not just stop here? 1 square for 1 hour. I was like, you know what? 64. And yeah, we broke the world record.
So you were saying that you hadn't thought about the consequences that would come with that. One of the consequences is that anyone who drives in Ikoyi sees your face every 50, 100 meters. And so you've been able to, create all this impact. You're a fantastic storyteller. And now brands are rushing you. They're like, come and help us tell our own story. So 2 questions. When you decide you want to work with brands, what are you looking for? That's one. And then the second one is, why do you think all these brands trust you and come to you to tell those stories?
Okay, first of all, I need to do a shout out to my manager, Taiwo. Where's he? Where's he? Is he there? Parkinson. All right, shout out to that man.
Also, Taiwo's been on Overnight Success in the past. So you can go and watch his episode. As I say, he's a jeweler who delivers gems. So
I think you can see why he's my manager now. It's not because, the real reason is because we're very alike. He also grew up in the slums. He's from Oshogbo, yeah. And we're very alike in a lot of ways, because when we talk, there's just this soul. Now, and I was saying this because someone asked me on Twitter, do you have a PR team? Do you have a comms team? And I just laugh, because the truth is, people can sense the difference between what is soulful and what is simply articulate. Right, and that's the thing about communicating something that you want the world to understand. It is not arming yourself with big grammar or this huge repertoire of vocabulary. It's that you speak with clarity in a way that can make people feel something. That is what people, they have a sense of discernment, and it isn't even in the way that you use big grammar. It's the integrity of what you do shines through the way you talk about it, and people can sense that, whether you're writing, whether you're speaking, whether you're doing. people just can sense it. And that was one of the things that I really love about Taiwo, is like, is someone that has a lot of soul. And because I knew that something was going to happen, I wasn't sure. I reached out to him that, you know, I'm confused about a lot of things. I want you to come and manage me, right? And this was before the fame or anything. But I just knew that something was coming that I wasn't equipped for. So that was when I reached out to him. And we came and we had lunch and we just started working together before any brand, no such thing right now. So what happened, I wouldn't say I've always been famous or anything, but I had always been known, especially on Twitter, because I used to write a lot of stories about the work that we do. So it's like I go out and I meet people, they're like, oh, there was something you said, or I remember. But after the world record, my life literally went from like 1 to like 1 million. And maybe a lot of people that have probably followed the trajectory of my life, you know, they don't know how different this change was for me, right? It was like, before, okay, it's maybe some people that know me now, like, as soon as I landed in Nigeria, like this, and I stood up, everybody in the plane started clapping for me. I was like, so that was the first indication that something had changed. So as soon as I walked out of the plane, this was after the world record, all the people, the like security guys, were like, chess master. So that was when it dawned on me that my life was going to be different now, right? And there were even people that don't even know anything about chess and slums. What they just know me for is like the world record. There's some people that even think I live in New York. It was my first time there. I've always lived in Lagos, right? So it's like everyone now had this new version of who Tunde Onakoya is, as the one that made Nigeria proud, the one that did the world record. But I'm just like confused, like, it's just for us to raise money for chess and slums that I even did this thing, right? But all of a sudden, it brought me a lot of personal fame and glory. And that threw me into a new world entirely. A new world where the celebrities that I used to see, I'll be like, this person is a celebrity. And now the ones coming to ask me for a selfie, you know, and that was a lot of change for me to kind of like come into so immediately, right? And thankfully Taiwo was there and he was able to see a lot of things that I didn't see. And of course, both of us made a lot of mistakes. You know, last year we made a lot of mistakes, right? But one thing that remained true is who I was, right? And I was already grounded in some ways. And that was enough to just anchor me, right? And just kept me going, right? Remember, the only way to sort of like adjust to a change like that is to continue to live for the audience of one. Because the moment you start to perform, you know, the moment you start to manage the world's perception of you, then you start to deviate from your original purpose, right? And the thing about like distraction coming to sway you is not, distraction is easy to decide when you have two options, good and bad. You'll be like, oh, this is bad, it's not good, I won't do it. That is not a dilemma. The real dilemma is when you are faced with two options. The first one is fantastic, and the second one is wonderful. And you have to say no to both things. Right? That is where true discernment comes. And, you know, working with Taiwo has helped me, like, properly navigate that. Right? We've had deals where some brands reach out to us and they offered us $500,000. Don't worry. I was still teasing Taiwo because if you see how we try to rationalize it, it's a very, well, I won't say it now, but of course a lot of people begin to reach out because the moment you become famous, you become a billboard, right? And that people want to sell or advertise through. Nobody sees you as a human anymore, right? They just see you as a billboard, right? And I'll say this finally because of time. Of course, it's easy for us to now say no to a lot of things because we had to learn that painfully because we said yes to some stupid things that made us make a lot of mistakes. But then what remained true is knowing that as long as I'm pleasing this audience of one and I continue to follow my heart and everything still comes back to standing in the gap for the children, then I'm doing the right thing. Because there's no rule book anymore. There's no maybe right thing or wrong thing. The lines are very blurred. You just need to find a way to rationalize whatever decision you make and make peace with it. It's as simple as that. Now, and in making a decision about like maybe fame and working with people, is that anyone can be famous. There are people that have maybe 5 million followers on Instagram because they were twerking in their so, right? I don't have 5 million followers. So I'm not as famous as they are. But they're famous. But to have true influence is different. Right? It's so much more powerful that people care deeply about what you have to say. And it's like, now that the spotlight is on you, you have to turn into flashlights. That is the only way to construct meaning from such a chaotic thing like fame. It's like when the spotlight is on you, you shouldn't just dance, but you should bring other people into the light so the world can see them as well. So understanding, having a sense of discernment of who to bring into that light to dance with you is how we think about our choices, right? Being the MTN ambassador, working with getting the Nord card, all of that, and some of the things that are already in the works is, does this really align with where we're going? And how does this also tie back into giving visibility to the children that need the opportunity? Now, a lot of companies and brands want to work with us, not because they care about the charity. They don't really care, but they know that because Tunde will show up at their event, we'll give them a lot of money just so he can show up at our event, right? So I've become almost a commodity. Maybe I can't change that anymore, but I can change how I use it, right, to benefit other people. And that is how we think about.
Okay. One question. This feel on your head. What's the story behind it?
Are you sure we are not tired of just hearing me talk since morning like this?
That's why they're here.
Okay. So the filler, first of all, is not a fashion statement. I can tell you that much. In 2021, August, I got my first car. One small Camry. I was very happy because from Oshodi I can get to anywhere in this country. I know all the bus stops, I know everywhere. So when I got my car, I was happy, So I was driving one day, because then I used to go to Vibanium Valley, and at that airport side to work. And I was coming back through Oshodi, and there was traffic. And a child just walked up to me in traffic. If you drive in Lagos, this has definitely happened to you multiple times. And the child was begging for money. I don't have money in my car, so I was trying not to maintain eye contact. You just look at the steering like this. The child, you're pretending like you are not seeing the child. And because when we went to maintain eye contact, your conscience would just tug at you. But I really didn't have money. So and the child was saying, Uncle, please, give me money, Ejo. So after some time, the traffic cleared and I drove off and I just looked and watched them move to the next line so you could wait, till the traffic light clears and continue begging. And we all know that story. We see these children every single day. It has become a staple. The following week, something happened. I was going to Ikorodu for something and there was traffic in the K2 area. Like 5 area boys just came to my car. They had knives. And they started like banging the window. And it was in traffic, so I couldn't do anything. So I just turned on my hazard light and I started honking. So there was a lot of attention on my car, so they just ran off. But they could have easily broken the window if they stayed. Or maybe if they had a gun and they had showed me the gun, I would have just left the car for them. Now, I'm saying these two things because these are two very separate events. But we need to have the level of awareness to construct meaning out of all of these mundane things, right? All of these things that is so hidden in plain sight that we just easily gloss over. The ones that succeed are the ones that have a deep awareness of the world around them. Think of the guy that built the airplane. Do you know what he saw? The Wright brothers. He saw a bird. Millions of people have seen the same bird. And it was like, if this bird can fly, then why can't humans fly? That was the first question. That question is the only reason why I can leave here today and book a flight to Abuja tomorrow morning. Because they asked that first question. And that question comes from a deep awareness of what is hidden in plain sight. Now, these two independent events, for a lot of people that has happened to, Nigeria is a very useless country. But what I did, or what I became aware of, or even curious, was that the children that were neglected while they were begging for money, they're the ones that someday lose their innocence and become the area boys that don't need to beg you, that will take it from you. Now, nobody becomes an area boy as an adult. It is the children that are neglected that go through that cycle of, they end up on the street for some reason, maybe poverty, maybe they're orphans, they are on the street. So to survive on the street, you need to use hard drugs. So you are much harder than the struggles you're going to face. And by using hard drugs, you lose your innocence, you do heinous things to survive, you maybe become a tool in the hand of one politician that gives you 5K, you go and disrupt election. If you're lucky, maybe you just end up in jail. If you're unlucky, you end up dead. We've seen this time and time again, but we have not been able to connect the dots. And that was how I connected the two independent events and found a way to pursue it, right? Because, again, I asked the question, how does one become an area boy? And I became very curious about it. So the next week, I went to the Oshodi Bridge myself. And I saw the area boys were under the bridge smoking. And if you're familiar with that place, you can't even go there at night. They've robbed, they've killed, they've raped, they've done all sort of heinous things there. And the moment I walked up to them, I was holding my phone. One of them wanted to take it and break it. It was the time I was recording him. So I was like, no, I just want to talk to you guys. So they're like, oh yeah, Ragbo Funwa, buy us weed. Which I did. And I sat with them and we just talked. And for the first time, I listened to the story of an area boy. And one thing was recurring. The reason why we have area boys, 90% of the reason, is because of broken homes. And this is how it happens. Most of them are not even from Lagos. Neighboring, Ogun State, Kwara. So in those villages where nothing happens. Imagine when you travel and you're driving through some places and you're like, how will these children ever make it in life? Those are the children that come to Lagos and find home on the streets. And that is how the cycle happens. And poverty underpins everything, but it's mostly because of broken homes. The mother died, the child is an orphan, married a wicked stepmother, Poverty underpins everything quite all right, but mostly that was the case. Then they end up in the correctional boys' home, that one in Ojota, where the people that should be taking care of them are selling weed to them. They end up back on the streets. So it was a recurring story. And I said, okay, so the children amongst you now, so they were the area boys I was talking to, but there were also the children there that were many, so many of them. So what the children were doing is that they were also using hard drugs. There's this drug that they were using called ice, or they call it para. So what the kids would do was that they would harass people on the bridge for money, or they would help market women, people that come to the markets to carry stuff. Some of them were working as bus conductors. We see them every day. But do we really see them? No, we don't see them. What we see is a dysfunction in society, right? So, and that was what I was curious about. So I went back there and I was like, okay, so the children, I'd like to meet them. Okay, so they gathered the children together. Wow, Iru, there's one boy they used to call Iru because it was always smelling. It was a very funny day. So they gathered them together and I was like, I would like to teach them something. So I told them what it was. I play chess, I teach children chess. And okay, go see voila. So the next day, I went to tell my team that, guys, we need to, because we're in Makoko at the time, we need to go to Oshodiana Bridge. Emmanuel was like, eh? So what do you mean Oshodiana Bridge? He said, please, nothing can change that situation. Just forget about it. And I told him that, do you trust me? He said yes. So if you believe in me, then you have to believe in the children too. And we went there. And for the next 7 months, roughly, we're at Oshodiana Bridge. And for those that probably followed on social media, this was in 2021. I told a lot of interesting stories then. And that is what I would call like the true inflection point for Chess in Slums, right? That was when I started to be known. And maybe that time I had maybe 1,000 followers. Then after the Oshodi project, I'm sure I had maybe 50,000 followers. I'm just using that metric so you understand how it like started to like build up. But what people don't know is that before the Oshodi Bridge, we had done Chess in Slums for 3 years. But the Oshodi Bridge changed everything. Do you know why it changed everything? It wasn't because of the chess. It wasn't because of the story. It was because of something. It was because of this cap. Now, we had trained the children, you know. Patrice Evra came to Oshodi Bridge. Do you guys remember? You know, the Canadian Embassy, CNN, everybody was so amazed by these children that we had neglected, that were now playing chess and excelling at it. And all of a sudden, people cared about their stories. And everyone was coming, doing documentary, you know, but I was so sad because after we leave the Oshodi, the children are still there. And it's a very complex problem to solve because, yes, we're empowering the children by like empowering them through their minds, through the game, through mentorship, all of these things. But they don't have a home to go back to. Now, there are a few options, and it's even a problem money cannot solve. So the first thing was put them in an orphanage home. But the orphanage homes were rejecting them. They were like, we can't have streets Oshodi Bridge kids come and stay with our own children because it would affect the dynamics of what we've built over the years. Now, the correctional facility that government has built, I won't even say anything. But that becomes like another incubator for hardening the children even further. Even calling it correctional home is already... So what then do we do? There was nothing to do. So then I had an idea. Let us do a tournament. Now, these children had learned so much over the past couple of months. Let us do a tournament to showcase what they had learned. So on the day of the tournament, because throughout the training, they were always wearing tattered clothes. I was like, let us make agbada for them. And we're like, yeah, so they look decent. Like, chess is a prestigious game. So after we made the agbada, the native, let's make filler too, so everything is complete. And we made the fillers. You know, it's not this color. It's more like what Daddy was wearing, but it was blue and red. And we made the filler and we put it on their heads. And I remember very vividly, we dressed them up at the park. So they had to walk from the park to the bridge. So they had to walk through the market. And as these kids started walking out, the entire Oshodi stood still. The market women were like, eh? You? All the cars that were driving literally stopped in the middle of the road, and these children were like, look at me now. Even they couldn't believe it. One of them was crying because he just looked at himself like this. A boy that has worn rags all his life. Even now, Agbadan. And I remember we had a tournament. We took good pictures of them to dignify them. Not to demean them that are from the slums just because we want somebody to pity them and help them. No. But to dignify them, because a more powerful way to tell a story, right, is not to demean the people that you're advocating for, right? It's to tell the world of the greatness that is in them that hasn't been manifested yet, and to find the most vivid expression of it. And nobody understood chess because it's a technical game. But you know what they understood? It was the filler. And what the filler showed us, because we took pictures of them, and I remember, you know, for like 2 weeks, I didn't know what to say. We had done this beautiful thing that nobody knew about. And one night, I just woke up and I just wrote, "We are all area boys." And I put the pictures online and I just wrote a story about what I felt when I saw these children and how far they had come. And I just went to bed. And I woke up the next day. The tweet had almost 70,000, retweets and likes. It had gone viral, and everyone was saying, "We're all area boys. We're all area boys." And I'm like, how did we manage to take something that had been such a derogatory term and give it new meaning? It was a simple thing, because all the first 3 years of Chess in Slums, we had been saying one thing, that chess can help improve this again, but nobody knew or understood that. For the first time, we're able to see the children, not because we pity them, because we see that they can look like us. And that is the real basis of empathy, right? That we see ourselves, bits and pieces of ourselves in other people. So it gave us a new basis for empathy. And the only reason why that became vivid enough was because we dressed them decently and we now capped it. Because now when you see the child with the cap looking colorful, just like you have to respect them. So it moves the conversation away from just pitying them from a distance and being like, "Hey, yeah," to say, this child looks decent, and I see him or I see her. And the filler was the differentiator. It was just the thing that made our stories of impact finally feel tangible. All right, just by dressing them up nicely. And that changed everything. And everyone wanted to be an area boy because of these children. And I remember I said something earlier that initially what we used to see is the dysfunction, right? But the truth is that we are all victims of a dysfunctional society in varying degrees. Maybe in some sense your privilege has shielded you, but for the children, they bore the full weight, the full brunt of what it means for our society to be dysfunctional. And if we don't stand on the gap for them, right, then we're going to lose out on something because we neglected the diamond in the rough. And that was how the cap became a staple. People from all over the world was like, how can we wear the cap so we can look like the children? So we started doing the cap. People bought it from Croatia, so I started wearing the cap. So every time I wear the cap, it is to honor that moment. So every time I wear the cap like this, I'm Tunde Onakoya. And when I take it off, I'm just Tunde.
If you watch the show, when we get to this point, I end the interview by asking my guests 2 questions. So the first one, if I had Tunde Onakoya to be my producer, and your job was, find me a couple of people whose stories I need to tell, people I need to talk to on Overnight Success, who would you be suggesting?
Well, you've talked to Taiwo already. I will. Does the person have to be Nigerian?
Not necessarily.
Donald Trump.
Okay.
Are you not curious?
I guess, yeah.
I'm just kidding. I don't know. It feels like all the people that I can think of now. Okay, maybe it has to be. I guess it should just be one of those politicians that just likes to steal money. And the reason why I say this is because I really want to know why. There was something I used to say, because when I went to Germany and I spoke at the DOD conference, I said the reason why we're doing this in the slums is because we want to hit some sort of critical mass where, because the only reason why I'm doing what I do is because I grew up in the slums. So now I'm deeply aware of like what it takes to have the right amount of empathy for a situation that I was also a victim of. Right. So it means that if we can raise 1 million children from the slums that also have that same background, then they would always have a sense of duty back to their community. Until I read a book, that book by this Kenyan writer says it is our turn to eat. And what? Yes, Michelle, yes. It is our turn to eat. And what that book showed me that completely broke my heart is that, because I thought that at least if you grow up in poverty and you make it, you would always have a place in your heart for the poor people. But that is not true. It is those ones that came out and escaped and survived that are the most vicious and wicked and have no empathy for the same beginning that they had. And this really broke my heart because I was delusional about this ideal world where these children would always, and I guess I just want to hear that from the perspective of like a thieving politician that probably made it from the slums and now got into a position of power. And despite knowing the consequences and the pain and the destructiveness of poverty, still sees it as his turn to eat rather than his turn to help other people.
Okay. And then final question. I don't know, how long have we been doing this? 2 hours? Is it that long? 2 hours. Okay, so we've been talking for 2 hours. And I've asked you some of the most personal questions I could find. I've dug into every facet of your life. So I'm going to open myself up. Is there any question you'd like to ask me?
Okay. So first of all, welcome to my YouTube channel. I know you're a storyteller, and culture custodian has become a place for us to hear new stories. And do you really believe that what you're doing, do you believe that it is significant in the grand scheme of things? And why do you believe that it has any significance whatsoever?
I believe it's significant, and the reason why is because I think, like the work you're doing, I mean, obviously this is not on the same scale, but it's about impact. So there's someone in this room, again, I'm not going to embarrass him, but one day last year, he sent me a message, and I mean, I probably told him I was crying, and he probably thought I was lying, but I actually cried. Because he was talking about, coming from a background where all his friends were either doing Yahoo or they were in jail. And for him, this show, or this format, carried a lot of weight because he just saw all the possibilities that existed. And so even if we put the video out and only one person watches it, if that one person takes away that message, I feel like the work is done. So inspiration is free. Our work is just to provide it, bring it to the audience. So, I think the stories we tell have importance. I think they have weight. And I think the onus is on us to continuously find new ways of telling those stories. So the archetype is old. This person came from something, they became... this person came from nothing, they became something. But the how is like the important thing. And I think we could all learn a lot from that how. And that's why this show exists. That's why I feel the work we do has weight.
Please let's give Mayo a round of applause. When Taiwo told me about the podcast, I first said no, because I don't do podcasts, and it just feels like, I feel like maybe when the story is complete, I will start to share bits and pieces of this thing, right? But when he told me the theme of the pod, he said overnight success. I was like, that is interesting. Which is so funny because we have even said nothing about overnight success here.
Yeah.
And I started to think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more it occurred to me that, what a lot of people consider overnight success is just the rest of the world catching up to the truth you've been living all along. Guess what? Tunde Onakoya has always been successful before the world found out. That is the truth. In those years when I was teaching in the trenches, the children in the school, in Lotto, I was already doing good work that was already impactful, right? And that is really what success means, right? And I will also finish this by saying this, that, someone, which is why Twitter is such like a very important, useful tool for me to just like dump my thoughts, right? It's like someone asked me, said, Uncle T, I'm losing patience. And I shared this, at a conference last week. It said, I'm losing patience. I'm losing patience. I'm losing my mind. How can I become great? And that is such a good question, because every young person wants to be great in life. That is the one thing we aspire to be, that the world values our gifts, right? And it announces us in some sense. But I told him, I said, see, don't ever pursue this vain greatness that you see that is so flashy, that is so prestigious, because a lot of it actually is empty. And because I've met a lot of great and successful people, I've seen the emptiness in their lives, and most of them don't even want it anymore. But it's already too late. Now, what I told him was, just because you can't even control that, right? But what you can control is your own journey of becoming, that you continue to show up every day in the little ways, in the big ways. Because when you show up, good things happen. And I finally told him that, and as with time and seasons, and just being more patient with yourself, is that time has a way of revealing and applauding what truly endures. There's the beauty of time that has to happen, that has to pass. Anything that is like a flash in the pan will disappear after some time, because there's no substance to it, right? But time, something that painfully endures, would eventually be revealed. And when that spotlight is on you and you have your moment, and there's this quote by Lenin that, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. You will be ready for it. And being ready for it wouldn't be when you're now great. It's in those years that no one saw it. That is what overnight success really, really means. And if you commit your life to that, to being a man that can stay through all the seasons, then one day, maybe one day if you're lucky enough, your billboard will be on Ikoyi. People will be like, it's because you broke the world record. The people that know that the reason why all of these good things, and I'm very grateful for it, is not because I broke the world record. It's because everything, my life, my story, my journey, has prepared me for that very moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for Tunde Onakoya. I'm going to tell the people at home and send them a message. So guys, if you made it here, there'll be another episode next week. Please join us. Thank you.